Good to go. Thank you. Well, Happy New Year. Thank you. Appreciate that. For those that follow football, it's the dogs versus the frogs.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Okay, we are going to finish up his journey, and next week we'll be having the triumphant entry. But this is the last part of his trip from Galilee to Jerusalem, and it's the last leg, so to speak. So his final journey. This is a passage out of Matthew that we had done probably, seems like it was 8 weeks ago, probably about 3 weeks ago. It really kind of sets the stage for a lot of what's going on in this last final journey. So I'll go read this. And Jesus said to them, this is after the disciples just said, well, we gave up everything to be here with you. Truly I say to you that you have followed me, and in the regeneration, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you will also sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or fathers or mother or children or farms or on account of my name will receive many times as much and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. So who's Jesus speaking to when he's the disciples? Probably the 12. There might be a few extra ones, but this has been kind of a long trip. So it's definitely basically the 12. What did they want and why? Do you remember?
They wanted to know.
What are we going to get for it? Okay? So what's the point Jesus is trying to make? Well, they're going to get more than they give up, but his point is in that last verse. Many who are first will be last. Many who are last will be first. In other words, you're going to get an opportunity to be a servant like me. You're going to get an opportunity to give up everything like me. That's the only way that I'm going to be the kingdom, is to give up everything as a servant. That's the point he's making. But that's not what they heard. That one verse that I have says, you will sit on a glorious throne and also sit upon 12 thrones. In other words, you 12 guys, 12 thrones. We're going to judge over all of Israel. So their expectation is physical, and he's in a totally different realm. He's in a spiritual realm. So this set the stage for all of what we've been studying leading up to actually the crucifixion. They still don't understand. So he foretells what's going to happen to him in Jerusalem. Now, they were on the road going to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking on ahead of them. And they were amazed, and those who followed were fearful. Again, he took the 12 aside and began to tell them what was going to happen to him, saying, behold, we are going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. And they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him, and spit on him, and flog him, and kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise from the dead. So what were they fearful of? Why did Jesus initially not go back to Jerusalem back in, was it the Festival of the Booths?
Kill him? Because he knew he was planning to kill him.
He was going to Jerusalem. Their fearful part probably was to say, man, they really stirred up against him now. You know, as many times as he's told them, they're a bunch of hypocrites, they're a bunch of vipers, they're a bunch of whited sepulchres. They've made their resolution that they're going to try and kill him. So Jesus gives them an explanation. How do you think they reacted? How did that handle what they were afraid of? Afeared of? I made a new word up. Didn't that just kind of amplify it?
Exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, what you're afraid of? That's exactly what's going to happen.
That is precisely why I'm going to Jerusalem. And this is how it's going to happen. It's not like, well, somebody's going to have a sword and they're going to plunge it through me. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be messy. It's going to be torture all the way through. And I'm sure they're going, then why are we going? They didn't understand. So, 2, asking for preferential treatment. Remember what I started out with? It says who was first is be last, and he was last to be first. That set the stage for this one. James and John, the 2 sons of Zebedee, came up to Jesus saying to him, "Teacher, we want you to do this forever. We want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Grant that we may sit, one on your right and one on your left, in your glory." So they know there's those 12 seats that he just told them about, and they want to sit in the seat to the left and the right, right? They're thinking physical. So what did they really ask for? Where they were going to be. But what did those 2 positions mean?
Power.
We're the closest to the power. What do you think prompted their request? In Matthew, are they first? You're going to see 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. They're thinking, okay, get there first. We'll ask for the 2 best seats in the house, except for the one in the middle, which is obviously for Jesus. So how does that fit? What did they want to be? First. They wanted to be first. Wasn't computing. They didn't understand what he was trying to say to them, okay? But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We are able." They didn't know what they were saying, but they said that we were able. And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you shall drink, and you shall be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized. But to sit on my right or to sit on my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." So what cup in baptism or immersion is Jesus referring to? Remember when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane? What he prayed for? Let this cup pass from me. The baptism or the immersion that he was in was he was totally immersed in being a sacrifice to the point of death. What he was asking or saying is, you're going to suffer the same kind of torture, the same kind of ridicule, this being spit upon and everything else that I have, and still be a servant for God to the point of death. But you're going to be a living sacrifice. But most of the apostles met horrible deaths. Okay? Premature and horrible. John lived to be an old age, but he went through a lot of problems too. So he says, you've got to endure all that. And then maybe you're the one who sits to my right or my left. But unless you're willing to go through all that, no, you can't do that.
Somewhat on the same line, the cup is definitely death that he's drinking. And the baptism kind of like the burial. You know, I mean, it's the old life is put away and the new life begins. We see that with him, that the human life ends, but the life, I mean, he's reincarnated, but the life as God begins, and our baptism is the same way. We put away the old, we put on the new. It's not with death and with ground, it's with water. I can see that correlation there.
I can see
That way, but I also saw the correlation because baptism is a transliteration of the word baptismo, which means immersion. And when we repent and we die to ourselves, what do you have to do? You have to bury the corpse somewhere. That's the immersion part of it. And then we're raised by the Spirit. What I think he's talking about here is certainly the burial, but they're not going to rise from the dead physically. They're going to rise from being dead spiritually. So it's that same thing, but it's the pain that they're going to go through and the trials that they're going to go through and the living sacrifice that they're going to be that is going to be so challenging for them. So who will sit at the right and left? He left it open for those who have been prepared, right? Those who were the servants to the point that they're going to be exalted there, like I was exalted. But we don't know who that is. So, hearing this, the other 10 men began to feel indignant with James and John. So you can tell this was a discussion between the apostles, or the apostles to be, or the disciples right now, and Jesus. Calling them to himself, Jesus said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles domineer over there, and their people in high position exercise authority over them. But it is not this way among you. Rather, whoever wants to become prominent among you shall be your servant, and whoever wants to be first among you shall be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So how'd they react? There goes the sons of thunder again. Maybe one of them said, "Oh, they got in there ahead of me." They're mad. How in the world do they think they should ask for that? But they were guilty of thinking the same thing. They wanted those positions. So how does what he says harmonize with what he said earlier? Many who are first will be last, and last first.
Not to rule.
that's right.
From the Gentile standpoint, which probably should have gotten their attention, but I'm looking at it from a godly standpoint. You have to be the greatest servant, a slave to God, in order to be first. So Zacchaeus, and I switched it a little bit the way it was in the book, Doug, because it talks about this on the way into Jericho, and the other one talks about it on the way out. So, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. So he's in Jericho. So where's Jericho? What country is Jericho in? Judea. So he's close. He's gone from Galilee, he's gone or all the way probably around Samaria, but he may have gone through Samaria. And now he's in Jericho. So he's getting very close to Jerusalem. He'll actually end up first going into Bethany before he goes into Jerusalem. But Bethany's like a hop, skip, and a jump away. It's pretty close. So he's going into Jericho. There was a man there called by the name of Zacchaeus. And he was a chief tax collector. And he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was. And he was unable due to the crowd because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree in order to see him, because he was about to pass through that way. So what was Zacchaeus' position? What kind of tax collector? He had tax collectors working for him, raking in money. How'd the Jews feel about the Gentiles and their taxes that were collected? And this guy represented Rome. And whatever he decided you had to pay in taxes, you had to pay in taxes. Now, Rome demanded a certain amount of money. And whatever you collected above that amount went in your pocket. Since he was short, why didn't he just go to the front of the crowd?
Were they?
Prone to let him go wherever he wanted to go if they didn't have to? If they were bigger and everything like that, you ain't going to push through a little squirt. They're going to push him back into the crowd if they want to. They want to see him too. So why do you think he wanted to see Jesus so bad? I mean, he was rich. Remember what did Jesus say about a rich man? It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven.
Well, he was interested in what everybody else was doing.
By this time, it's been 3 years in the ministry. Can you imagine in the area of Judea, you think there's anybody who hadn't heard about Jesus? The miracles and the Word, and how he spoke the Word, and how he told about his Father, who he was, why he sent him, what God really wanted for mankind versus what the Pharisees and Sadducees have been telling them. It was a new message with power that said the message was the truth. And I think he wanted to see that truth. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Hurry down and come down, for today I must stay at your house." And he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. Why do you think he picked Zacchaeus? There's no wrong answer, because we don't have the answer. What could Jesus look at somebody and tell?
Their heart.
I think there was more to it with Zacchaeus wanting to see Jesus. He was a man who felt there was no way he was going to get salvation because he was a chief tax collector. And they've been telling him over and over again, you are the worst sinner of sinners because you collect money for the Romans. So what was Zacchaeus' response? Wasn't like Peter's. Peter says, "Oh, don't be around me. I'm not a righteous man." Zacchaeus knew he wasn't a righteous man, but he hurried down. When the people saw this, they began to complain, saying, "He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner." But Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, on half of my possessions I am giving to the poor. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I am giving back 4 times as much." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he, too, is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come in to seek to save that which was lost." Oops. So who do you think was complaining the most, and why were they all complaining? They were all complaining. Why?
He was the one to be Jesus. Had come down and he was going to go to his house.
Yeah.
But what was the big deal with going to his house?
Yeah. The guy's a thief.
And he says, and it said, he's a sinner. Again, it's the perspective that everybody else had to say, well, we're not that bad. Sin's sin. There's no big sin, there's no little sin, there's no medium sin, there's just sin. We're all separated because of that. And they were looking at levels. Because, and you can kind of see it, with the law, if you had something that you really did something wrong, was your sacrifice bigger than somebody who did something just kind of minor? I mean, they had to give a sacrifice every year, but if you did something wrong, you had to give a sacrifice, right? Under the old law, under the Pentateuch. So they kind of looked at things as levels. They didn't understand one sin separates completely. So who responded to the complaining? You could hear it. Who responded? Zacchaeus says, if I've swindled somebody, I'll give it back 4 times. And half of what I got, I'm going to give it to the poor. So he heard all this murmuring and everything like that. Then Christ responded to what Zacchaeus said, not the crowd. He never addressed the crowd, did he? So what was Jesus' response to Zacchaeus? Basically, you've been redeemed. Which for Zacchaeus, more than he expected. All he wanted to do was get a glimpse of the man. And he ended up with redemption. So, healing while on his way is to death. I didn't know how to phrase it any other way. Then they came to Jericho, and later, as he was leaving Jericho, so this happened in Jericho, now they're leaving Jericho, with his disciples and a large crowd, a beggar who was blind named Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. And when he heard that when he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. So why is he sitting on the road? Just a coincidence? He knew he was going to be coming by because he knew the road from Jericho that was going down to Bethany, what that road was. And he knew that Jesus had been in Jericho because he'd been in there long enough at least to have dinner over at Zacchaeus, his house, right? So he's healed many people because a large crowd that's going with Jesus, they're going with him because what he's done. And they're following him. So he's got the 12, he's got a large crowd, and he's leaving. So what did Bartimaeus ask for?
Mercy.
Nothing else more specific, just have mercy on me. Many were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and said, call him here. So they called the man who was blind, saying to him, take courage, stand up. He is calling for you. And throwing off his cloak, he jumped up and came to Jesus. It seems kind of straightforward, but so why did they keep telling him to shut up? Why do you think they kept telling him to shut up?
Well,
Teacher. Teachers were revered in Jewish. What's a blind guy? What was the philosophy on why he was blind? His parents did something wrong or he did something wrong. Okay? He's a sinner. So they're kind of saying, shh, don't bother him. You don't know who you are. You don't understand who he is. Why do you think he didn't go to the blind man instead of telling those in the crowd to have him come to him? It was a big crowd. I don't know how big it was, but it was a big crowd. He could have moved through the crowd, but he said, have this man come to me. If he was blind, how do you know how to get there? I mean, Mark's account is more vivid because he says he threw off his cloak and he came to him. Now, I'm thinking he could hear the voices and he walked towards the voices, or maybe even kind of ran towards the voices. And replying to him, Jesus said, what do you want me to do for you? It's a reasonable question. And the man who was blind said to him, Rabboni, I want to regain my sight. So at some time he had vision and lost it. And Jesus said to him, go, your faith has made you well. And immediately he regained his sight and began following him on the road. So why did Jesus ask him? What do you want me to do? Why do you ask that? I mean, it's obvious the guy's blind. What would have been more important to ask for? What did Zacchaeus ask for? Or what was Zacchaeus really after? Redemption. What would have been more important for Bartimaeus to ask for? Redemption. He wanted physical to be healed. But Christ healed people physically to show he had the authority to redeem people spiritually. So what did he do to receive his sight? In Mark's account. Just said, your faith has made you whole. This is one out of Matthew. And it talks about two people versus one. One had to be Bartimaeus. But it's a little bit different. Now, of the three of them, and there's one in Luke also. And the one in Luke and Mark agree. The one in Matthew is a little bit different in the fact that it's two people. Who was there? Of the three of them, who was there? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew. Luke may or may not have been there. Mark was too young. They're all inspired by the Spirit. But what somebody interprets and puts down is there's specifics in Mark. And if you could look at miracles in Mark, Mark is always going to have more detail in it because Mark is writing to the Roman mind, which the Roman mind looked at power. That's in Mark's account. Luke's is going to look at more of the physical details that were done. Matthew is going to look at it, some of the stuff he looked at a very high level, okay, in his accounts. But here is a little bit different. Down in verse 33, Lord, we want our eyes to be opened. Same thing. You look at what's written here, it's the same words. It's just two people versus one. And Matthew doesn't ever identify who they are. Mark does. Luke does not. Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes, and immediately they regained their sight and followed him. Now, it could be there was 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 people that stopped him on the way out of Jericho too. Matthew's could be one account of being stopped, and Mark's could be another account of Jesus being stopped. And there could have been 5 more stops that he had as he was on his way to Jericho. We don't know about because he didn't write about everything. But it's a little bit different in what's those two. I just wanted to bring that point up and make sure everybody understood it. Now we have the parable of the king and what he gave his slaves. This is kind of long, and I got 15 minutes, so I'll see if I can make it. Whoop. Now, while they were listening to these things, Jesus went on to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem, And they thought the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. So he said, a nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself and then to return. And he called 10 of his own slaves and gave them 10 minas and said to them, do business with this money until I come back. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. When he returned after receiving the kingdom, he ordered that the slaves to whom he had given the money be summoned to him so that he would learn how much they had made by the business they had done. The first slave appeared, saying, Master, your mina made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good slave. Since you have been faithful in a very little thing, you are to have authority over 10 cities. The second one came, saying, your mina, master, had made 5 minas. And he said to him also, and you are to be over 5 cities. Then another came, saying, Master, here is your mina, which I kept tucked away in a handkerchief. For I was afraid of you, because you are a demanding man. You take up what you did not lay down, you reap what you did not sow. And he said to him, from your own lips I will judge you, you worthless slave. Do you not know that I am a demanding man, taking up which I did not lay down, and reaping what I did not sow? So why did you not put my money in the bank? And when I came back, I would have collected it with interest. And then he said to the other slaves who were present, take the mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. And they said to him, Master, he has already 10 minas. I tell you that everyone who has, more will be given. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. But as for these enemies of mine who do not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them in my presence. Does that sound like another parable? It's a yes or no answer. Grant's going like this.
It's the talents. Okay.
It sounds a lot like the talents, which is in Matthew later on. But it's during the Passion Week, and he hasn't gone into Jerusalem yet for the Passion Week. But here's the parable of the talents. That Jesus spoke to the crowds and the disciples. That's a very distinguishing part between these two parables. For it is just like a man who is about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another each one, each according to his own ability. And he went on his journey. The one who had received the 5 talents immediately went and did business with them and earned 5 more. In the same way, the one who received 2 earned 2 more. And the one who received 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and put in his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you have entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful with a few. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Also the one who received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you have entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I have earned 2 more talents. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful slave. You are faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Now the one who had received the 1 talent also came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. And I was afraid, so I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, you worthless, lazy slave, did you not know that I reap where I did not sow, and I gather where I did not scatter seed? Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received the money back with interest. Therefore, take the talent away from him, give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has, more shall be given, who has an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that's the other one. Very similar, very parallel. So looking at the first part, Who's he speaking to, and how's this different from the account of the parable when Jesus tells it in Jerusalem in the Passion Week? They're a little different. Why are they different? Who's he talking to? Take the easy one. Who's he talking to in this parable that he's talking on the way to actually Bethany? Just the 12. Who's he talking to when he's in Jerusalem? The crowds and the 12. Much, much broader audience than he's talking to when he's talking to just the 12. How many does everybody get in this one? Everybody gets 10, actually. 10. Everybody gets 10. And the other one, 5, 2, and 1. Remember, he's talking to these people that are, these 12, that 11 of them are going to be the apostles. One of them is not. Right? They're all going to get the same capability to teach. The crowds aren't. All of us in here don't have the same talents as if you go with the parable of the talents, right? Some have more, some have less. Use what you got. If you use what you got, you're probably going to get more. So you can serve more, right? But it's a little bit different. But it's the same ending. Those that use it will get more. Those that don't use it, it's going to be taken away. But he adds a little bit more to it in the one in Matthew. They'll be thrown in outer darkness where there's grinding and gnashing of teeth. What does that usually indicate? Hell, okay, or exile from God. What's the expectation of the group, the 12, and how does that parable address that expectation? What's their expectation? They're on the way there. If you remember back 40 minutes ago, they were expecting the kingdom to be established when he went into Jerusalem on the upcoming trip. But it was a physical kingdom they were thinking. He tells this parable here, and it's totally different. He's saying the nobleman is going to go away to a distant kingdom. We'll go take this apart, but he's saying you still don't understand. And he tells this parable, like I said, it's a little bit different, but he tells it twice within a week. Or at least we have it recorded twice. A nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself and then to return. And he called 10 of his own slaves and gave them 10 minas and said to them, do business with this money until I come back. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. When he returned after receiving the kingdom, he ordered these slaves to whom he had given the money be summoned to him so that he could learn how much he had made by the business they had done. Who's the nobleman and where's the distant country? Who's the nobleman? Jesus. Where's the distant country? Heaven, okay? He's going to go onto that throne. That's the distant country. When he arises the third day, and after he's been in and around the area after his resurrection, he goes up into heaven and he goes to his faraway kingdom to be king. What do the 10 slaves represent? What do the 10 minas represent? Us. It would be us. And the minas would be the talents. Now this is, like I said, this is addressing specifically to the disciples. But if you look at the parable of the talents, it's us. The minas, it's a little bit of money. It's where you have the account where the woman puts 2 minas in. A little bit of money. Capability, authority, but they all get the same. So who do the citizens that hate the nobleman represent? This one I disagree with what I've seen in some commentaries. Some commentary says, well, it's the Jews. The context that I see of this parable is much broader than that. Is there a middle ground with Jesus? Can you either love him or hate him or just say, oh, I don't know, something like that? You do one or the other, don't you? You either love God or you hate God. I think these are the people who said, I won't accept him as the Savior. And it's much broader than just the Jews. I mean, the Jews, obviously, some hated him. It wasn't all of them. We put them all in one lump. They weren't all in one lump. Paul hated him until he stopped him on the road. What event corresponds to the nobleman returning after receiving the kingdom? What event? Let me change the question. What event will correspond to the nobleman returning after receiving the kingdom? The second coming, the end of time. The first slave appeared, master, we'll go through the first one, he got 10. The second one, he got 10. He made 5 on the 10, so he still did well. What do the return on the minas represent? Reward in heaven, possibly. I think that was what I think the 5 and 10 cities represent. The minas probably represent those that may have been brought or the word that's been spread. He never really explains it totally, but he explains the thought behind it. The thought behind it is to say, if you use what God's given you for God, you're going to do better, and there's going to be a reward. But if you don't, you're going to lose everything, thrown into outer darkness, and those people that hate him, they're going to be thrown in there as well. He's making a distinction that you can't sit on the fence. You have to either be for God or against God. There's no middle ground. What I got, about 30 seconds? 29, okay. So what's the problem with the slave that only returned the original 10 minas? He didn't do anything. I almost got through. I had 3 slides left. So how is it that one has that more that will be given versus the one who does not have will be taken away? Why is that?
Someone who will do something with it.
Yeah. Once someone demonstrates the love they have in their heart, the faith they have, and uses what it is, you get more successful. I mean, I started out, Susan met me as a heathen. Didn't know much about the Bible. What I knew about the Bible wasn't right. But I've grown. And as I've grown, I can see God's given me more talents than I had. What does the slaughter done in the nobleman's presence represent? I'll leave you to read this out of Revelation. But at the end, in 19, so the angel swung his sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters of the vine for the earth and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Those are the people who refused to follow Christ. And it was done in his presence, according to John's writings. Thank you.